up, guys? Welcome back to the Football Corner Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremiah Queen. And of course, before we get started with today's episode, I would like for all my viewers out there on YouTube to please subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening to me on a podcast app like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or even Spotify, please subscribe to the podcast. Let's cue it up. So, we just got through with the trade deadline in the NFL, and a lot of trades happened. Of course, I can't go over all the trades that happened, but here are the trades that had the biggest impact, will have the biggest impact for the teams that made the trade. So, the first trade that happened that caught my attention will be Bradley Chubb coming from the Denver Broncos going to the Miami Dolphins. And this trade is probably the biggest trade in before the deadline because Bradley Chubb is a top 15 pass rusher in the league. And right now he has 5.5 sacks on the season. And the Miami Dolphins are, middle of the pack in sacks. And they hope to get more sacks in the future because they have to play quarterbacks like Pat Mahomes and even Josh Allen in the AFC. So the Miami Dolphins are planning on making a deep playoff run and look like they're trying to make it to the Super Bowl this year. So in order to do that, you need to have a pass rush against the quarterbacks you'll be facing in the playoffs. So I thought Bradley Chubb was the biggest pickup prior to the deadline. The second pickup that I saw that was major was T.J. Hawkinson coming from the Detroit Lions to the Minnesota Vikings. Now, the Minnesota Vikings is an underrated team, and through all their success, they felt like they still need another playmaker or offense just to solidify, or not even solidify, to help Kirk Cousins be able to be the best quarterback he can be going toward his playoffs. I think the two teams I just discussed are these are playoff moves this year. There's two teams that a lot of teams a lot of analysts don't talk about as much because they're not the top tier teams in their respective conferences, but I think there are two teams that will scare a lot of people if they have to face them in the first round of the playoffs, in the wild card round. So T.J. Hawkinson going to the Vikings is a really good move on the Vikings' part. Another trade that happened was Chase Claypool coming from the Pittsburgh Steelers to the Chicago Bears. This move, I don't know if it will actually pan out this year, but for the future for Justin Fields, now you got him a big receiver who's 6'4", physical, could block, can run routes. And it looked like in Pittsburgh, Kenny Pickett already favored the tight end, Pat Freiermuth, and even the rookie, George Pickens. So it looked like Claypool was going to get a lot of targets, and plus Deontay Johnson got the big contract deal. And he wasn't going to get so you kind of tell that this guy wasn't going to get all the touches. So if you're not going to get the touches, and Chicago offered him they offered the Pittsburgh Steelers a second-round pick for Claypool. So now you have Darnell Mooney, Claypool. Now you got two stud running backs in David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert, and even like the tight end in Chicago, Cole Kmet, who's really good. So the Chicago slowly are making moves for their offense so they could be a better team, and who knows what they will get in the draft. The last team that made a move that this won't be impactful this season, but going forward next season, especially if this player gets reinstated by the league, will be Calvin Ridley. Got traded from the Atlanta Falcons to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think this is one of the biggest moves because I think the Jaguars were missing that big play receiver. And even though they picked up Christian Kirk and they got Zay Jones and Christian Kirk signed the big deal, Christian Kirk is a really good receiver, but he's not a guy that scares other teams. You want that player that scares the opponent, and Calvin Ridley does that. Prior to him being suspended this season, he was a top 10 receiver in my opinion back last year. This guy was very productive until the gambling happened, and then he had some he wasn't mentally there, and he had to take some away time for that. But I think Calvin Ridley would be very impactful if he could stay healthy and stay out of trouble. I think he'll be very impactful for the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2023. So we're already heading into Week 9 of the 2022 NFL season. This season has been going by super fast. And since we're already past the halfway point of the season, there's a few teams that I want to show some appreciation to that I say a lot of people don't show appreciation to. The first team will be the Tennessee Titans. I mean, as a Jaguar fan myself, I don't like the Titans, but the team plays good football, even with their quarterback being injured. Last week they beat the Texans while only throwing the ball 60 yards. Only had 16 passing yards. They used Derrick Henry, who went over 200 yards, in order to get the victory, and they were very physical. They played defense. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, well, they're playing the AFC South. It's not the strongest division in the league, and also their opponents they have beaten are not formidable opponents. That is true. So they beat the Colts twice. They beat the Texans, and they beat the Commanders. So they're not beating the highest caliber teams, but you can control who's your opponents on their schedule. And if you beat their opponents that are given to you, you should not knock a team for doing that. I think the Tennessee Titans have always been a good team. I think they're a very well coached team. Mike Vrabel being the head coach, I don't think he gets enough credit. I understand he won Coach of the Year last year, but I don't think he gets enough credit for what a great job he has done since joining that organization. The second team I like to talk about that don't get enough appreciation will be the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons are 4-4. They lead their division in the NFC South. Like I said, another division where it's not the strongest, but if you look at the people they beat, this is like opposite of the Titans. They actually have beat playoff caliber opponents. So they beat the Seattle Seahawks, and they also beat the 49ers. Now, everybody loved the 49ers in the NFC. The only team that it's one of the best teams that in most people's eyes that will be coming out of the NFC will be either the Eagles or be the 49ers. And the Falcons beat the 49ers. They beat them by 14 points. It was 28-14 when they played each other, and it was because the Atlanta Falcons are a physical team. They run the ball, and they're trying to make as little mistakes as possible. This team has a good chance of being a wildcard team just based off of their division, but also because they have a formula of winning football. Don't turn the ball over, run the ball, be very physical on defense. And that's how they've been able to be at 500, and the only team in the division doesn't have a losing record. Now, the final team I would like to say that doesn't get enough appreciation will be the Minnesota Vikings. They're the most underrated one-loss team in the league. And I think the reason why is because most people are seeing that they only win close games and all the games come down to one score. But if you look at the playoffs, that's how a lot of games come down to. It's a one-score game in the playoffs. So if you want a formula of winning in the regular season going into the postseason, if you could keep this same model, you'll be very successful because teams sometimes don't know how to handle close game scenarios. They usually blow it, but the Vikings are showing that they can, and they will be able to win in close ball games. And the only team that beat them was the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Eagles are a really good team. So I think the Vikings are handling their opponents very well. They play to their strengths. They also have one of the defensive front runners for defensive player of the year, and Zadarius Smith, who leads the league in sacks. So that also helps. This team added T.J. Hawkinson on offense, which just makes their offense looks like one of the best offenses in my opinion in terms of personnel. You have Dalvin Cook, top 5 running back, Justin Jefferson, a top 5 receiver. You even have Adam Thielen, who I think is a top 20 receiver. And now you got T.J. Hawkinson, who's easily a top 5 tight end, along with Kirk Cousins, in my opinion, is a top 15 quarterback. So this team, you look at all the pieces on offense, and I'm not even talking about the Vikings' defensive pieces. This team will be in the playoffs this season. They already got a 3-game lead on their division, which I don't think they will give up because they're just playing too well and the division is playing too poor. The Vikings will be a playoff team come January, and we'll see what happens. All right, to end today's episode, I would like to go over what happened on Thursday Night Football. So it's time for TNF recap. So the Philadelphia Eagles had to go down to Houston to take on the Texans. And, of course, it being one of the worst teams versus arguably the best team, you would thought this game would be a blowout. But going into the second half, the score was tied up 14-14. I thought both quarterbacks made plays for their respective teams. The one bright spot for the Texans, who had them losing 29-17, was Dameon Pierce. He had a $139 on the ground. He ran was physicality. Of course, the Eagles did what they always do. They got takeaways. They had 2 turnovers off of Davis Mills. They had got 3 sacks, all by Javon Hargrave, and also Jalen Hurts was playing like an MVP, and we know he can. He had 2 passing touchdowns, over a 120 passer rating, and this team kind of pulled away in the second half. And that kind of dominated. I thought the Texans came out with a great game plan. It sucks that Davis Smith had an interception in the red zone that doesn't help the team. And then when they were driving down the field, he threw a boneheaded interception instead of taking a sack and flipping field position. It gave the Eagles easy field position. At the time, the score was 21-17. And with that, you would live with that because it's only a 4-point game. But Davis Mills turned the ball over, which gave Jalen Hurts and the Eagles offense only 30 yards to go. They ended up scoring a touchdown. It was a touchdown thrown by Jalen Hurts to Dallas Goedert. The Eagles are playing like how they should. They're 8-0. It seems like they are closer to becoming an undefeated team, but we'll see what happens down the road. But so far, the Eagles are flying high, and the Houston Texans might have a quarterback problem on their hand. Thanks for watching and listening to the Football Corner Podcast. Podcast episodes will be dropped on Mondays and Fridays, as well as YouTube videos on Mondays and Fridays. You could click the link in my description in order to follow the social media links to my podcast social media pages. And also, you'll be able to stay up to date on new drops, new takes, and all that good stuff. Thanks for watching. See you next time.